The problem with the conservative argument here is that it is engaged in a consequential analysis of whether or not the government is justified in doing something. And I think that's the real problem, is that it's like, okay, well, you say it's on the impetus of the state. The Democrat says it's on the impetus of you, right? And what I say as the libertarian is, no, aggression is not justified, right? Like, aggression is never justified. There is no level of evidence that the government could ever give me where the government has the right to quarantine and lock down people, because that never will be morally justified. Because the problem is once you grant them that authority, and once you say, well, they're justified if you can prove beyond a shadow of a doubt, right, that the outcomes will be preferable. Well, that can never be done. Technically, it just can't be done, because what metrics are you using? What are your values? Right? Like, what is your subjective analysis of what's better and what's worse, right? What's one life worth, right? You know what I mean? Like, how do we predict what the future will be in terms of, the economy or inflation or heroin overdose? And what I would say is that aggression is never justified. And that's just it. And that if the fear was real, right? And if they wanted to give us the information, in the interim, right? And they want to say, here's what we think, right, then the market would appropriately respond to those things, and individuals freely choosing whether or not they want to send their kids to a certain school, whether or not they want to educate them at a private school, whether or not they want to go to a certain restaurant, right? It's the aggression itself is never justified. And the moment you say that, well, there's a chance it's justified if you can prove that it's justified, right, is the moment that you already grant them the authority to make bullshit claims and bullshit science to prove that it's justified, to get enough dumb fucking normies, right, that get all of their news from headlines and from 30 minutes of nightly news, right, to go, oh, well, I guess it's justified. And then there's, the 10% of you, people like you, screaming into the void going, no, it's not. The evidence isn't there, because you gave them that right to begin with.
Two things. One, that level of argumentation won't work for the very normies that you need to wake up, right? So if I'm saying, look, they locked down schools, all the evidence wasn't there, do you see how terrible that is? They'll say, yeah, I can see that. But if you say, I'm not even going to talk about the data or the harm that it causes, I'm just saying the government should never have the right to lock anything down, you're going to lose most people. They're going to be like, well, what? It is more effective to look at on the specific case why this specific action in a pragmatic sense was devastating, was not based on science and was devastating, rather than try to convince them through a philosophical argument. Secondly, I do sort of disagree with you.
Just for the record,
well,
I do both, right?
Well, I know,
what I mean?
But they lose, you lose the effect of talking about the specific scenario when you say, by the way, they should never be allowed to do this, because most people aren't going to agree with that premise. Now, they might be able to be talked into that premise at a later date after much, but you would understand that sort of the messaging and the propaganda that people have received for decades through their whole life would say that there are times when the government intervention into certain things is allowed. I will give an example of when I think one of those times. Let's say hypothetically that some biological weapon was unleashed upon the city of New York, one precinct, we'll say, in New York, and it affected and was immediately killing within 2 weeks 98% of the people in that precinct. And the government says we have to quarantine these people that were affected because this is such a lethal virus that if the quarantine was broached, it would lead to high infection rates and high amounts of deaths in other places. You're saying the government should not be allowed to quarantine those people?
Yeah.
I just disagree. I
also think everyone outside of them, right, should be able to defend their private property.
Yeah, but that's not how it would work, right? You wouldn't even know.
But I'm just saying, I think the airline industry, for example, right, should be able to say, you're from New York, you're not getting on a plane. And the train should say, hey, you're from New York, you're not getting on the train. And the people that own private roads, right, should say, now, when you talk about, let's say, publicly owned goods of transportation out of the city, the government does have the right to restrict publicly owned situations there, right? So, for example, assuming the airline is private, the airline can say no, right? The trains can say no. But the private road, right? Or sorry, the public road, well, the government has stolen said public road. And so it is the duty of the state, to the best of its ability, right, to take the stolen property that they have and utilize it in trust to the best of their ability to protect the private property rights of everyone else, right? So the government has a right in the event of a biological weapon of like 98% mortality, right, to restrict travel on those public roads in that instance, because that is what they're doing. What they don't have a right to do is tell the airlines what to do, tell private property owners what to do, tell businesses what to do. And I can't imagine too many businesses would be open to people coming in from an area that was impacted this way. You see what I'm saying?
They wouldn't know. You wouldn't know. And it's basically,
What do you mean you
it would be very, how would you know that this person was in that area that was infected? If they don't appear infected, how would you know? Like, it's not like you're running a mom and pop hardware store and someone walks in and you're like, were you one of those people that were infected? Most people won't do that. You'll just be like, I assume this is another customer.
Okay, but let's assume, right, that I'm in New Jersey and I own, I don't know, a restaurant, and just across the bridge, a biological weapon has impacted, and I know that people might be coming from that region. I might change the way I let people in. I might shut down completely, right? As a community, we might come together as private property owners and say, no outsiders allowed. That's the reality of the situation, is that,
well, you know, if you were there, but what if you're in Texas? Right, and the person travels that far. The problem is, like, you could see,
right, but you gave an extreme example. It would change things radically, even in Texas.
Well, that's the point, though, right? Like, so I would argue that I would say that there is some threshold argument that we would never say that the government never has a right to impact on your sovereignty in any way, shape, or form. I disagree. I don't think that that's a true statement. I similarly would say I don't think that you should have zero freedom and the government always has the say over you. So then for me, if I could find these hypotheticals that would be like, here's a hypothetical where I think that, yes, in this ridiculous scenario, I could see the government having a temporary restriction of your right to travel, because it is so obvious that that right to travel would impact people in a negative way so significantly. Now, that should be met with the highest amount of scrutiny and should be constantly retested. It shouldn't be something done in perpetuity. But given that, that's why I say, okay, if the government was able to prove that there needed to be a lockdown because some disease, there is a hypothetical situation where that's possible. COVID wasn't even 1/10 of the way close to that, though. Wasn't even close.
Let's engage in the consequential analysis of this. If I was to legitimately believe that the bioweapon hit New York City, right, and the government was aware that it kills 98% of people, and let's say it has an incubation period of 2 weeks, right? You show no symptoms for 2 weeks, right? Assuming that they knew that this occurred, right, and that they were there from the onset, right? What I think the government would do, if they just lock down the city, assuming for whatever fucking reason they don't lock down the rest of the city, right, or the rest of the country, assuming they're justified in locking down the city, I guarantee you that private property owners and private businesses and that were set up in a competitive market would be more efficacious and better than the state at protecting people anyways. And what would likely happen is that the government would demand that the economy not collapse and that and demand that people not shut down their communities and stay open. And what they would almost certainly do is facilitate the death of the entirety of the United States. Whereas if we had those rights and we didn't have the authoritarian control of the government, communities would set themselves up and say, no outsiders, go fuck off. And the government would be the one saying, no, we have to keep the economy open. I guarantee that the government's control and power in this situation would actually make it worse as opposed to better if we want to engage in the consequential analysis.
I don't think, like, because the problem is you're looking at it through the lens of like, well, if the government didn't exist, then that would be taken care of better. But in the current situation we have where our government does exist, right, I don't see mass waves of private, owners all across this country shutting down so much that these private people that would be infected with this incubation period that would be free to leave on foot would somehow not spread that infection elsewhere. I just don't believe that. I don't. That doesn't mean the government would be good.
Starbucks is shutting down, right, without mandates, and and that was for a virus that kills what, like 1%? You're talking about 98%?
Right. But what I'm saying is I'm not saying the
problem
would
is the
good.
crystal ball analysis.
Suck.
All I have to do to prove you're wrong, right? All I have to do to prove you're wrong is get you to recognize that there is a possibility that the government would do a worse job than if we were free. And if you can admit that possibility is true, right, then we know that the crystal ball analysis of justifying actions based off of potential outcomes in the future is not an appropriate metric to measure these things by. And instead, we should be focusing on what is and isn't aggression, because that is something that we can objectively look at.
But again, that analysis of saying, is there a possibility that the government could get it worse, right? That only would be something that would be evaluated if the possibility that the non-government action wouldn't lead to a disaster, which it obviously would, right? If people contract, I mean, just think about it, even if it's like, because there's just no way. There is no feasible scenario that if you said there's nothing we could do, you're free to leave, you have this virus, but go ahead, you can go wherever you want, that somehow a unification of private people around this country would be able to keep those individuals isolated to where they would be unable to spread the disease. It's not possible. It's just not. There would eventually be people that would be like, I'll allow you into my store, because they wouldn't even know that you're one of the affected. The entire country wouldn't voluntarily shut down for that 2-week period. Some people would still be out mingling, mixing it up, right? Those people would then be spreading it for the further 2 weeks, and so it would eventually spread. Now, it's a ridiculous scenario, don't get me wrong, but what I'm saying is
the country's done one way or the other. Right? You gave a scenario where the government doesn't have the resources to stop this anyways.
But that could be true, but still we could see that the role of the government as set up today, that would be a role that we would say, yes, this is a role where the government coercion would be justified. Now it is, and because of that, right, then the argument becomes a threshold argument. It's not that this sort of coercion is never justified, it's that it's almost never justified, and the threshold of meeting that justification should be so high that practically it should basically never be entailed. And the problem, and I think that the problem you're going to have is the majority of people just won't accept what you're advocating for a total elimination of the government. And so instead it is more, the state. Instead, it's more effective to explain to them listen, if you accept that sometimes the state might have the right to infringe on your right to freely move, for example, or your right to go to church, even if you believe that, it is clear in this specific situation that they have gone far beyond that. They did not meet the basic bare minimum to justify even a temporary restriction of that. And if you don't step up now, these restrictions will become ever more onerous, because it's never been about keeping you healthy, it's about authoritarianism. Once you could win that argument now, there's a better chance of getting to where you want, for people to having a more healthy distrust of the state, because they realize that they've been lied to so great. In a weird way, like Casimir said, look, one of the best things we saw from schools was actually because of it. That's absolutely true. I think that this is a watershed moment for libertarians. I think that it's very simple that this case, with one of the most blatant misuses of authoritarian, not only was the evidence used for the authoritarianism lacking, and now it's being proved to be the opposite, not only is the evidence of the censorship of countervailing views being more evident, but the actual damage and the scope of the authoritarianism is something that was so blatant that most people, good luck explaining to someone why the Patriot Act fucked them over. Good luck explaining to your farmer friend, like, well, you know that they're taking they're surveilling all of your communications. But when you say to them, like, hey, remember when your mom was in the nursing home and she died alone? Remember when you couldn't pay your mortgage because you weren't allowed to go to work? They fucking get that. That is right in your face. And once you could start off that jumping point and be like, once you understand that, now look what they're doing with the taxation that you have. Now look what they're doing with the restriction on your ability to, get free or to get types of healthcare that you would want in other ways. That's my feeling on it.
I would say that the consequences that you're stating, right, is simply evidence of why they shouldn't have this power to begin. Because they will do that.
Perhaps. I think that it should be extremely limited. They will always, I think that it is inevitable that the state will always rear its ugly head. I don't see a system where that won't occur, particularly in complex societies like we have. And I think the best we could hope for is to have people like you, and to a lesser extent me, constantly questioning any of the state's authority on these issues, and to do our best that when it eventually steps over the bounds to have justice against those people that did such in those institutions in ways that kind of set it back to balance. But it'll never be solved. It's a problem that will exist in perpetuity throughout human history, that unless something fundamentally changes with humans, that the state will exist.
Criminals will always exist, right? Every politician is a criminal. Every police officer is a criminal. Every person working for the government is a criminal. Criminals will always exist, right? The issue that I see is, do we attempt to try and grant them moral justification? Well, I think that the best thing to do is to not grant them. right? And so like when you give them this 1% and say, well, there's this 1% where, in fantasy, in like the extreme cases where you're justified, I think that has led us to where we are today, right? Like we had, like the minarchist origins of this nation was an extremely limited state. And, the state has grown to this apparatus because we gave them that 1% justification.
But I think it's inevitable. I think that the state will eventually rear its head. And so to say the best you could do is to limit it as much as possible to understand, right? Because what this comes down to, it's the same argument that I have with the communists. Like in theory, I do disagree with the communists in theory, but in theory, I agree with you. But it's just, to me, it's a fundamental difference of thinking, is this practically applicable? I don't think it is. I don't think that we could have a system where we're at today would ever conceivably lead to an elimination of the state. I think that it could temporarily come there. I think that we would have negative impacts as a result of that. And then eventually we would see some form of state or something that acts as if the state, that has the same negative consequences that we see currently with the state. And so I think that I would
say two things real quick. I'll say two things. Number one, just because my house is, if my house is on fire, I put the fire out, right? Regardless of whether or not the house will eventually catch on fire at some point in the future, right?
Mm-hmm.
So the argument that like, well, the state will rear its ugly head in some way, therefore we should justify the state, is like, well, no, my house is on fire. I put the fire out, regardless of the fact that when I put the fire out, there's a possibility or even an inevitability, given enough time, that the house will catch on fire again. Right. So I don't know that that's necessarily an argument.
But it's like, but what I'm saying is that basically the state is in effect, basically a force of human nature. So in effect, what you're doing is outlawing fire. You could try it. You could say, well, I think fire is always immoral. It always burns down people's shit. So we'll just outlaw it.
No,
but it won't work.
I'm saying criminals do exist, right? But that doesn't stop us from trying to stop crime, right? The state is a crime.
But I disagree. The state is only a crime if it is possible to get, just like with fire, right? You could say fire is a crime, right? So we'll outlaw it, but if it's a necessary part of life that it will always rear its head, then it's hard to call it a crime. And if the alternative would be a net worse for people, then I don't think you could say, the best you could do is limit.
This would be right?
Yes.
Is it not inevitable that people will rape other people?
Yes.
Well, then by your definition, rape is not a crime. There's nothing wrong with rape.
But again, it's just
rape
a matter
will always rear its ugly head.
But it's a matter of you calling the state, the existence of the state, a crime. And it would be the same as if I call the existence of, for example, guns. If I say guns are always used for death and I'm against death, even though death's inevitable, I'm against any instrumentation that leads to death. Therefore, all guns should be illegal. Guns are always a crime. And you'd be like, guns will always people. Neither's the state.
Right. No, the state is inherently criminal because of the actions that are required. It requires slavery.
No, that's your definition that it requires slavery. That's what I'm saying.
Definitionally, it requires slavery. Taxation is slavery.
I could say the same thing. I could say that I consider death and the causing of death amongst any living thing to be a crime. And therefore, guns, what's required to operate them, is always a crime. Therefore, we should outlaw guns.
No, that's not the same logic. Because number one, a gun is a tool. The state is not a tool. The state is an apparatus made up of individuals, people making actions, right? The state is describing the actions that they take that are criminal. Like there's no description of actions being taken with the gun.
But again, like if it is an inevitable part of existence and that attempts to remove it lead to worse outcomes, then yes, we could say that it's not criminal. Right? Like, there's all sorts of things. Like, you could say that's okay.
Here we go. So let's use the rape analogy then, right? Let's say I live in a village, right? And every year we pick a woman, right? A beautiful young woman, right? And we recognize that rape will always rear its head, right? Like dudes will rape, and we can't stop that from happening. We can only punish them after the rape. So what we do, and this is analogous, right? Is we take a young, beautiful woman and we put her in a little hut. Right? And if you feel like raping someone, you just rape that girl, right? You just rape that one girl. And everybody in town agrees that if you feel the need to rape, you just rape that one girl. And you know what? If we got rid of that system, there might be more people that get raped, right? But it's okay It's justified because the consequences are actually better because only one girl is getting raped, as opposed to like rape being a persistent problem in society.
No, because again, what you're talking about is you have the fundamental argument of what the state is, as you're saying it's not a tool, it's made up of a collective of people that are taking purposeful actions, right? So you're just setting up like a purge-like society and saying, are we justified in a utilitarian system to be like, well, it's okay to purposely harm people in immense ways for some sort of perceived greater good? That's not what we're talking about, because there's a fundamental difference here. And the fundamental difference is, one, that without the state, things would be worse. That's sort of a consequentialist argument. But second, that the state's inevitable. Right. And so it's, again, it is operating basically
I maintained
as
all
a
of the
tool.
principal elements in my analogy.
Well,
Rape is inevitable, right? And we're reducing rape. The consequences are better, and it is an inevitable action. So if you're using that same logic, you have to bite the bullet and just say that you're okay with the town that has the one rape victim, because consequentially it's better, and it is an inevitable thing.
No, I don't.
Assuming that it's
I don't have to bite that, because I don't have to bite it because, as I said, I'm looking at the state as sort of a force of nature. The act doesn't apply because rape is not a force of nature, right? Even though individuals will always commit rape, that is an action like lying or violence or abuse or battery.
Let me pick that apart then. Like, why is it that rape is not a force of nature, right? But the existence of the state is a, quote, force of nature that you can detangle from human action?
Because the state is not an action, the state is a tool.
No, we're describing a group of people doing certain things. Like, no, no, the state is not a tool. The state is made up of people that are making acts of aggression, that are actively aggressing upon other people.
No, but it is a tool. The state itself is a tool. The state could exist without the act of aggression.
Okay, well, the rape dungeon with the one girl is a tool to reduce rape. The analogy holds the same.
It doesn't, because rape, we would agree that rape is always wrong, right? In all consequences, there's never a scenario where rape is justified. You would agree with that?
Agree.
No, you would say the same about the state? There is no action the state could ever take. I disagree.
Slavery. You think slavery is justified?
I disagree. It's not slavery. Not in all instances. Can you imagine a scenario where state exists where it's not slavery? Define state.
Okay, so a state is a system of governance that is maintained through acts of aggression, usually including stolen property, theft, and is non-voluntary.
Okay, so for example, if the state exists, what we would traditionally call a state, right? But if the United States government would stop taking taxes tomorrow, right, and it would stop having a system of laws and police, then it's no longer a state.
So if the United States government was purely voluntary and did not take involuntary taxes, right, and everyone chose to be a part of the government and signed a contract to agree to whatever laws they wanted, and they didn't they extort your taxes, then it would just be a government. Also, they'd have to give up all of the stolen property that they have.
Okay, well, I think that it's just a semantic definition of what we consider state. What you're really talking about is coercion.
Yeah,
taxation, coercion, right? That's what
it's
you're saying.
Inherent to the
coercion
state.
Is how, not necessarily. If you define state as that, you could envision a system of government that wouldn't have coercion, correct?
Yeah, it's called a covenant community, and it's libertarian.
Okay, so for example, hypothetically, tomorrow, every single person that pays taxes in this country, yourself included, could say, I totally voluntarily co-signed to all of this, even if the externalities that forced me to agree to it through legal measures disappeared. I'm just agreeing that the system we have right now is good. So if that were to happen, and in effect, everything would be done the exact same way, it's just that people would all co-sign voluntarily to it, you would say that's no longer a state.
If they gave up all of their stolen property.
What, to who?
To the original property owner, to the best of their ability.
Who's that? Back to the Native Americans?
People who homesteaded the property.
How do you prove that?
I mean, that's a difficult thing for sure.
Right.
I mean, the Native Americans didn't homestead most of their property, right? So they don't have a claim to most of it. Like monolithic structures or sacred places where they built things on the surface, right? Like that's fine, right? Some of the property that they've stolen via eminent domain, you have to give that back to the original property owner, right? The taxes you'd have to give back to the people that you stole the taxes from until the state was bankrupt because they've stolen so much taxes. And the rest of the property, right, that you can't determine, you have to abandon.
Okay, so the problem is this, right? And the other reason that the rape analogy won't work is because we could say that there are certain things in this world that you don't need evidence for, right? Like rape's bad. That would be an example. Genocide
aggression.
Bad. Like I hate, but it's not just aggression. Aggression's sometimes justified.
Aggression's never justified.
You punch my wife, I punch you back.
But that's not aggression. I'm the aggressor. I punched your wife.
It doesn't matter. There are times that it could still, depending on the person's subjective point of view. You
can't name a justifiable act of aggression. No, you didn't. I was the aggressor. You were defending your wife. I'm the aggressor. I'm the one that committed an act of aggression. No, it's not aggression.
It depends. So, okay, so I punch you and then your sister punches me back.
The aggression is the initiation of force, right?
I punch you, so you punch my wife, I punch you, your sister punches me back.
Right, you created a brawl. The aggressor is you because you punched me.
So she's not aggressing. I'm not aggressing.
They're just defending and trying to stop the attack. Like if you break into my home, right? If you break into my home, right? And like and try and steal my TV, right? And I shoot you in the middle of the night, right? I'm not committing aggression upon you. You broke into my home and tried to steal shit and like scared the shit out of me and woke me up in the middle of the night, right? Like you're the aggressor.
Well, it depends on how we define aggression, right? And again, the problem's going to be that the way this
I gave you the definition.
But what I'm telling you is the way that this practically plays out is there's not an objective crystal ball where you can see this thing. So, for example, you could see how
aggression, the initiation of force. The person that initiated force is in the wrong.
Define force.
Destruction of the person's property or self. Without their voluntary consent.
Okay, so for example, I could be a free-range cattle person, right? Like you see the movie Open Range, like so I'm free-raising cattle, and this person believes that is causing destruction of his land. The free-range person thinks that that's not the case, that this is land that should be available to get from one parcel to the next, and so the person that's upset that I'm on the land decides to come and shoot me. That's not aggression.
Define land.
The land that the person through their sort of metricing.
I'm just fucking with you because you're trying to get me to define all these words.
Well, no, right? I'm not doing it to be a dick, though.
The person that's free ranging cattle that steps onto someone else's private property, right, and starts doing things to their property without their permission is the aggressor.
Right. So then what we see, so you would say the shooting of that person would be justified. That wouldn't be an act of aggression.
No, because you become the aggressor if you do not use the minimal force necessary, right? So like if an old lady, like to give you an example, like if an old lady with dementia is walking on the sidewalk, right? Mm-hmm. And then she like trips onto my property. Like she just kind of falls onto my property and she's just going, Rob, it's my property. There's no Rob around here, right? And she just goes, Rob, I baked cookies, right? And she's barely on your property. And then I just start blasting, right? Like fucking, It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia. So anyways, I started blasting, right? I'm the aggressor because I didn't use minimal force necessary, right? Like what's required of me is that to the best of my ability, I try and resolve the situation with minimal necessary force. Now, if I can make an argument, like now, if she starts reaching into her waistband and starts saying, I'm a cap these fools, right? And now she's like a 22-year-old dude, right? I'm totally justified in blasting. Because the minimal necessary force is that I'm justified in shooting this person because I perceive a threat and I'm responding to that threat. The old lady with dementia is not someone that I can just unload 17 rounds into.
But the problem's still going to be a problem of subjectivity because now you're getting into this more kind of out there discussion on what is minimal, right, and what is necessary, right? So let me give you an example. I was on a panel. I won't use people's names, but I could, but whatever. I was on a panel once, and they're being dicks to me, right? Like everyone on the panel's just, making little jokes, blah, 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 blah. And I said to one of the people, I said, you going to accuse me of being a sexual harasser like you did that other guy? Is that what you're going to do? And then be gleeful when you get their viewers? Is that what's up? Now, there's an argument to be had that was not the minimal necessary force to combat that style of argument. Was I the aggressor?
Rob over here fucking refusing to name names, but we all know who he's talking about. We all know. All right. I pay attention to Twitch drama. I just don't usually engage in it.
Me neither. But if they're gonna throw it in your face, I figure fuck it.
Right. So now you're asking, is words in a debate an act of aggression? Right. So we're gonna go to Webster's 1828, right, as a definition for aggression, which I love to use Webster's 1828. Because a lot of times language, especially in the last 20 years, has just magically been changed. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Right. So aggression is defined in Webster's 1828, right? The first attack or act of hostility, the first act of injury, or first act leading to war or controversy, right? Now, you could say, like, you could try and like manipulate it and be like, oh, well, we're leading to controversy. This is the first act leading to controversy, right? Yeah, that's not an act of aggression as we would define it, right? Like, just simply like, because there's no harm done to the person, there's no harm done to the property. What you're talking about is reputational damage, right? Reputational damage is not owned at the individual level. So the person, we'll call him John. We'll just call him John, right? John doesn't own his reputation. His reputation is not private property, and his reputation is not part of his body, right? So if you do reputational damage to him, right, you've not actually damaged his persons, and you've not actually damaged his private property in any regard. Reputation is held by other individuals, right, in their view of John. So that's not an act of aggression. That's just you speaking your mind.
No, that I necessarily agree with that. I think that I could come up with consequences that would say that it would still be an act of aggression to just go up to someone and be like, go fuck yourself, and just start on. I still think that I would consider that an act of aggression. Hey, thanks for the radio, D. I would consider that. Nonetheless, the problem is even the definition you read doesn't say anything about minimal necessary force. So you can see even in this context that we're already parsing to, and the point is, like, we could go back and forth this all night. I'd be happy.
I'm not going to let you get away with that, right? We're talking about Webster's 1828 definition of aggression versus libertarian philosophy. Right? Like, obviously, libertarian philosophy is not fully encapsulated in the definition of something that existed before libertarianism.
Right. So then the Webster's definition is irrelevant to this conversation because we're talking about you and your philosophical view of the world.
Demanding, a definition for.
Well, I'm not demanding like to be a semantic asshole. I'm actually asking, right? Like when you say, because you're making the hinging of your worldview is this: all acts of aggression are always immoral. Correct? They're always evil. That's the fundamental. So I think that So we got to get away from morality, separate from ethics, right? Okay. So, right, I wouldn't necessarily use the term evil. I would just say morally unjustifiable. Right? It's not justifiable from an ethics position because it violates natural law, and one cannot logically argue against it. So I think that objectively, anyone that hears that philosophy espoused would say, "Well, what does he mean by aggression?" Like that's a fair take, right? Like if we're saying that this action is always unjustified,
right, and then you want me to define force, right? And it's like, all right, come on, you know what I mean?
Well, but again, like it's still confusing to me because what I'm saying is there will be subjective metrics in this because, like, when you say minimal force, I'm not asking you to define them. What I'm saying is, even if we have an agreement on what those are, subjectively in each situation, people will disagree, right? So under our current legal system, right? You might say this, right? And I understand you would say, well, I don't favor the current legal system, but let's say that my neighbor's dog defecates in my yard. Let's take out ridiculous notions of me shooting him or something like that. Let's say I say, hey, pick up this dog poop that's in my yard. And he's like, yeah, I'll get to it tomorrow. And then the dog does it tomorrow. And so I sue that person. I take that step. A lot of people would say, well, there are a lot of things you could have did before that, right? You could have like knocked on their door and said, can we talk about this in person? Could have called if you're a member of a homeowners association, whatever. There are a lot of things that you could have done before you just took the step of you said one thing to them and then you're like, fine, I'm going to become litigious, right? And so a lot of people would say, well, that's sort of you being aggressive to them because you didn't use minimal force. And then I might counter with, I disagree. Other people have had this problem. I came to them politely the first time they didn't listen. I just skipped all of the garbage in between. And so both of us could have a legitimate view of looking at that situation where he would say this was not minimal necessary force, right? And I could say I do believe this was the minimal necessary force. And you could see, you would obviously, you would understand the paralysis. Well, but and real quick, you would understand. I'll leave you explain why, but you would understand the paralysis of action, because if you're constantly forced to say, I need the minimal amount of force and so you have to go through this like ladder of escalation. I agree with you in principle, but it seems that there's a time where it would be okay to skip steps, because you're like, listen, you can see that this is, the burden on me as the landowner in this place to deal for 2 years of dealing with the next slight step up to meet the definition of minimal. I think that it would lead to paralysis of action. And so again, in that sense, both people could legitimately feel the aggressor was on the other side. Now, you would say, well, the person whose dog violated your private property, that's the original aggressor. But that person could also say, because I didn't respond with minimal necessary force, that I too am an aggressor.
So, a lot to unpack here. So, first of all,
can I say this real quick? I got 15 minutes, and then I swear I got it back.
Yeah, we're way over time. It's fine. But so when I say minimal necessary force, right? You're talking about to resolve the situation as it currently stands. We're not talking about, later on during the date when the aggression is no longer occurring, right? So what minimal necessary force would be the situation when you catch the dog pooping on your land, right? That's very different than how do we resolve what is an act of aggression? The act of aggression has already occurred, right? And now the act of aggression is done occurring, right? Like the dog is no longer on your property, right? The poop is on your property, right? So the minimal necessary force as a human being is to, maybe it's to go knock on their door. Maybe it's to give them a phone call, whatever that is. There's nothing, what you're talking about is an appeal to the kind of the problems of our current legal system, and then calling that aggression because you're being litigious. It's not aggressive to sue somebody, right? And even in our current system, it's not aggressive to sue somebody in that regard, even with the problems that are inherent, because if it was like the dog pooped on your property one time, you probably wouldn't even get a court date, right? You probably you wouldn't get that day in court. And if you did, that would be an insanely hilarious situation, right? So when you're talking about minimal necessary force, the dog is an interesting example, because then you get into the philosophy of whether or not what is a dog's life, and whether or not it's a moral actor. And and then you go into a veganism debate, right? I don't want to use the dog example because it leads to a whole nother line of questioning. But if we use just a human example, right? Like the kids won't stop running on your grass, right? I'm an old man and I don't want the kids on my fucking grass, and the kids keep running on my yard, right? So minimal necessary force would be, yell at them, get off the ground. You have to use escalation. You do have to go through that ladder. That's human interaction, period, right? I can't grab a gun and start shooting my neighbor's children because they ran onto my yard to get a ball, right? It's the same concept. You yell at them, hey, get off my property. They won't get off your property. So they're little children, so you walk and you forcibly remove them. You refuse to get off my property, you push them, right? They injure themselves, and that's the fucking parents' fault that they do. Right?
But two things, right? One, I don't understand why the act of aggression not occurring currently, let's say we'll take the dog poop example out. Let's just say the kid. So let's say once the kid runs on my yard, and then I look at my Ring doorbell and I see 4 hours later that they're in my yard, I don't understand why your principle of minimal necessary force would no longer apply in that situation after the fact 4 hours. I don't see what the difference is, why that wouldn't continue to apply even after the technical act of aggression has ceased to exist, and now we're just looking to a solution. To me, it would be the same. I don't understand what the material difference would be, why that doesn't apply.
So let's say the kids ran on your yard, right? Now you have to buy fertilizer or something to heal the grass, right? Because you value the grass. They've damaged your property, right? So in this case, the act is already done. This is not right. Now, what you are justified in doing to them, right, is you're justified in walking in their grass and damaging it to the same capacity. You're also justified in demanding, they're stopped from arguing the non-aggression principle in this regard up until restitution is paid. So they owe you money for the damage that they did to your property, right? They're children, so in this instance, the parents
go
owe
back
you
to
money.
that statement. They're stopped from arguing the non-aggression principle until restitution's paid.
Up until the value of the restitution, yeah.
Well, that doesn't make sense, because then that gets right back to the same problem of the grazing problem, right? Where we could say, okay, you refuse to pay restitution, I shoot you. You would say, no, that's too far. You had to take the minimal
above restitution.
Right. Okay. So then
right?
I'm
so
allowed to do.
Right.
But again, so you're saying at that point, so the minimal necessary force no longer applies once restitution. Once property is damaged and restitution is forthcoming or hasn't come in.
I never said that. No, I never said minimal force.
But again, the problem is because what we're talking about is a problem of subjectivity, that two reasonable people could come to the conclusion that the amount of force that was applied in retaliation to something wasn't the minimal necessary. And the problem is with that word becomes, minimal,
yeah,
right? Like,
yeah, well, criminals exist, right? And see, the problem is that we tend to look at crime based off of an idea of intent, right? We don't look at crime philosophically in an appropriate way. The way that we should look at crime in an appropriate way, intent matters, right, to the criminal, but that's a separate issue to natural law, right? About who is an aggressor and what is an objectively wrong thing, right? And so it is up to the observer to be able to determine and to mediate in these situations, right? So for example, value is subjective. All value is subjective, right?
Sure.
So it could be true, right, that I value my grass with my life. It literally could be true. You'd probably be insane, right? But it could be true that you value your grass to an extreme degree, right? And so you could burn down someone's house and it would be morally justified, in that regard, right? But you'd be a crazy person. Right. And so the thing is that you have to come to voluntary associations between people to determine how you're going to deal with these situations. And this is why we advocate for things like rights enforcement agencies. We advocate for police. We advocate for rules. We advocate for insurance companies. The difference is that we advocate for systems that are voluntary because that is the only justifiable system.
But again, if one of the two parties doesn't consent to the voluntary system, then what do?
You don't move in next door to somebody that doesn't consent voluntarily to any of the systems that the community is attempting to uphold.
But what if it's so if, let's say me in my little town here, and I got I don't know how big my yard is. I think I got an acre and a half, right? But let's just say reasonably it's 20 yards on either side to either of my neighbors, right? Mm-hmm. So I buy this house and I'm like, hey, I'm not giving in any of this voluntary insurance shit or mediator shit. Fuck all that. I'll do what I want when I want, right? They're just gonna move. They're just oh, no one to live there. They just move. They're going to voluntarily relinquish
that could be what they do, right? It is practical. It's just what would occur if that was the case, right? And this was a common thing within the community because you don't live in a covenant community, right? Where everyone agrees to it. What you would do is you would look at property and you would say, okay, this property has a certain value, right? Let's say this property has $200,000, right? And there's another one that's 250. And they're identical houses and identical land. But the difference is that the other property has an HOA where everyone agrees to certain rules and stipulations, and this other property doesn't, right? So you run the risk that someone in property A that's $50,000 cheaper could move in next door to you that has different values that let's say they blast their stereo really loud or something like that, right? Whereas there's certain rules that you voluntarily agree to when you move into the property that has an HOA, and you may pay a premium for those certain rules that you so wish to live on.
That's not how things would work in this system because people already own property. Because you're doing this like you're playing a game of Civilization. It's here's 1 million people moving into this empty space. That's not what it'll be. People already live here. If there was no law, what my neighbor wanted in our community would be vastly different than what I wanted, and would be vastly different than what the next neighbor wanted. And even if we did, so there's no argument that we would all agree to the same mediation, or we would all agree. I might say, I think that we should, let me put it this way. Even if you did agree to the mediation, there are certainly people that won't agree with the mediator. Even if I agreed with it in principle, said this.
You just conceded the entire debate.
How so?
Because you've already recognized that multiple different communities would want to live under different systems of rules voluntarily, and that you just prove that the state is unjustified because it imposes those implications on others.
No, what I proved is that it's not applicable, that it wouldn't work in practice of what you're saying, that like all of a sudden that these three houses that might have
giving
different
the communist logic.
No,
the communist
what I'm
logic
giving
is one
like,
of outcomes and what we prefer to force other people to do so because we believe it's necessary.
You saying that an outcome would occur and me proving that it wouldn't happen isn't me giving communist logic. It's showing that it wouldn't work practically. That if this hinges on, well, if three neighbors disagreed and there wasn't some sort of law, then two of them would just leave if the third one was stubborn and no one would move in except people that agreed. That's not going to happen. It won't happen. I would feel like what will happen will be there'll be conflict because I'll feel like, well, fuck all this. I ain't moving. My family's had this house for generations. And they'll say the same thing. I'm not moving. I've had this house for generations. Now we're at loggerheads, right? And now it's like, well, the mediation's not going to work. Right? It's just not going to work. And so then you get into this problem of subjective, like, well, what is minimal necessary force? And you get into the problem of what is value. Their kid runs on my lawn. I value my lawn at, let's just put an absurd number on it, like $10,000 worth of value that was diminished me by their kid being on my lawn. So there's no mediation. So I'm like, fuck it, I'll smash his window.
It's the observer.
That is less. Who's
mediation?
The observer?
Is the observer. The observer is by the voluntary association.
Well, I would have to consent to the voluntary association. I don't.
Exactly. Which is why you wouldn't move in to a neighborhood that doesn't have these systems.
But I'm not moving. I'm staying. It has nothing to do with moving. I refuse to. You're
talking about a situation. Let me back one up here, right? So you're talking about what if we had this system currently, and we snap our fingers and this occurred, and then you're doing a consequentialist like commie analysis of like what would occur if we went from the system we have right now instantaneously with everyone's private property to the system I'm advocating for. Peep the name. Right? The name is Fabian Liberty because I'm an incrementalist, right? Voluntary associations already occurring. The Mennonites do this, the Amish do this, right? Like what I am advocating for is that societies and groups collectively come together to live in covenant communities based upon the rules that they want to live under, right? Based off of like, if they want to pay tithe, they pay tithe. They don't want to fucking pay tithing, they don't, right? What we're describing when we're talking about natural law, right, is what can we objectively show is morally unjustified. And again, you already proved yourself wrong in that by stating that there are all these different people that will want to live under different rules and different laws and different community organizations, etc. And you're trying to also simultaneously, in a contradiction, morally justify the existence of the state that imposes a kind of natural order onto those people against their voluntary wishes, thus enslaving them.
What I'm telling you is that your system is impossible because some form of aggression will be inevitable in all of these cases, right? Because, like, let's even break it down to the most. Now listen, let's break it down to the most simple. Like, I don't buy this incremental argument because what I'm saying is even if we would take incremental steps, it would never work. Let's say me and you are neighbors. We both agree in principle to live in the same sort of society we want. We don't have to get into it, but we just really agree.
We live in a covenant community, right?
Sure. Mm-hmm. We move in next to each other. We agree. Part of the agreement we have is if there's any dispute, we have voluntarily acquiesced to a mediator type system or an insurance type system. Yeah, and we voluntarily say, we voluntarily say we will abide by whatever they say. Then we have some sort of dispute about, you had your dickhead friends over playing your goddamn rock and roll until 9 p.m. and I had to get up for work at 4 a.m. and so I was pissed. So we have this sort of dispute, right? And we go to whatever we've mutually agreed to mediate. And the mediator says, Fabian, you're right. You have every right, under the contract that we've set up, that you have every right to be able to have your friends over until 9 p.m. playing this music. Sorry, Rob, you're wrong. And I say, I refuse to abide by that. Nope.
Doesn't matter.
Now what? Why?
You're the aggressor now.
Okay, so I don't think I am.
Doesn't matter. You already voluntarily agreed to this mediation.
It doesn't matter. So
criminals
are you saying
exist. So you're saying, right? Like we forcibly remove you.
It's not a matter of criminality. Criminality is a matter of the law. Criminals are someone breaking the law. There is no law.
You're breaking the law.
And so what matters then is subjectively what I feel. You subjectively feel I'm breaking the law. I don't. I feel the mediation was corrupt.
So I'm the one with the loud music, right?
Yeah.
And so you saying
Of course.
I'm not going to abide by that. What are you not abiding by?
I think that we set forth something that said that there is reasonable expectations of privacy and non-noise pollution, particularly in hours after sunset. And you don't think that it met that criteria of being unreasonable, and the mediator agrees. I disagree with the mediator. I think
so. What are you going to do?
That the mediation wasn't fair. I refuse. I then feel that it is not an act of aggression to go smash your drum kit. It's not an act of aggression.
Now you're the aggressor.
But not to me.
We force you to pay, or we beat the shit out of you. We do whatever we need to do until you're in line.
I think you think that I'm the aggressor. I think you're the aggressor.
No, that's not subjective. You just proved that it's subjective.
Of course it is.
You signed a contract. You signed a contract saying that you would agree to a mediator in this situation. You voluntarily chose to have.
I think the mediator was wrong. The mediator is not enforcing the contract. I agreed to sign up for the mediation because I thought they would fairly interpret what the regulations were. It is clear to me that they're not fairly interpreting it. Maybe you're friends with
you're the aggressor.
It doesn't matter. So then let's say, given that, then let's say that we set up this mutual situation and objectively we could see that the mediator was going to rule for me. However, you went behind the scenes and gave that mediator a large sum of cash in order to get them to change their view, right?
Then I'm the aggressor. I violated our What do you mean not to the outside world? What are you fucking talking about?
Well,
you're just being
for
silly.
Example, you said no, because you said that the consequence to me would be force me to pay or beat the shit out of me or something. Assumably, there would be some sort of enforcement mechanism, right?
Yeah.
So that enforcement mechanism comes and beats the shit out of me. Are they aggressing?
Not if you're the one that damaged my fucking property.
No. We're saying that the mediator
voluntary situation.
The mediator sided with you because. The mediator sided with you because of corruption, because you gave monies. You had more money. So the mediator sided with you, right?
Right.
The enforcement
mechanism I violated the contract. I violated the contract. I'm the aggressor.
Right. But no one knows that. Right? So inevitably an enforcement.
So hold on. Pause. What you're talking about, right, is you're trying to make a practical argument. Like, does this not happen today? Do innocent people not go to jail under our current system?
Yes.
Right? Do people not commit crimes? Is fraud not a thing?
Yes.
Right? I'm not a communist. I'm not a utopian. I'm not saying this is a perfect society. Right? What I'm like, criminals exist. In this instance, you branded me a criminal based off of like what we occurred because I violated the contract. I'm the criminal. Right? It's, that's an unfortunate circumstance of life. Criminals exist. So now we're talking about the practicality of how you prove that criminal intent. Right? And so now we're getting into the consequential analysis of whether or not my system would be better at ferreting out corruption and fraud than the current system. And the answer is I don't know, because I don't know that system perfectly. It could be better. It could be worse. Right? The free market is obviously going to be better at it over time because it's not a monopoly and it hasn't monopolized that force. And so it would be more valuable and better to being able to ferret out those things. Like you're not,
it's the opposite.
You're not sticking to the principles.
No, it's the opposite of a consequentialist argument. The consequentialist argument you're going to lose, right? But before we even get into that, you say that's where your rape analogy comes in. You're like, well, that's consequentialism. That justifies evil shit because you'd say society as a whole would have less evil if we committed this intentional evil act. So we're not operating on the consequentialist framework. What we're operating is your framework that says that aggression is always unjustified. And so any system that predictably will lead to aggression, it would be unjustified to advocate for that system. And what I'm saying is
no. That's the consequentialism. You're absolutely wrong. What you're doing is you're trying to make an argument that the system that I advocate for, as set up and described by you, right? You're getting completely out of the realm of what is justified and unjustified. And now you're saying, I believe, based off of my understanding of your system, that it will lead to additional acts of something, additional acts of criminality, and therefore it is wrong. That is not the same thing about whether or not aggression is justified. You're talking about second and third order consequences of whether or not additional aggression would occur in the framing of how you believe said society would be. You're absolutely engaged in consequentialism.
there is true that there is a level to consequentialism to that. I'll concede that, right? But it's still inevitable, and you can't argue against it, that aggression will exist predictably because of the system that you're advocating for. Like, because inevitably what will happen is you'll get tired of that, because we already live in this society where people own homes. Inevitably what will happen is you'll get tired of the shit. You'll get tired of it, and you'll say, I'm not moving, and I'm tired of that guy's shit, and so I'm going to do something about it. And it could be, they choose to be nude in front of your kids every day while they're on their property, and your kids on the way to whatever they need to do every day see that nudity, and you're constantly like, stop fucking doing this, and they're like, no, I won't stop doing it. It's my property. I'll do it. Whatever. There is infinite things that could occur in this, and the problem is that inevitably what will happen is that people will aggress. They will. And they will not feel it's aggression because they'll say they are subjectively entitled to it. And this will occur over and over again. The fundamental difference between the system we have today is saying, look, we have set up laws that by nature of living in this country, you have to agree to those laws through coercion. Even if you haven't voluntarily acquiesced, you're forced to acquiesce through coercion. So you can't rape people because the law says you can't. But in your society, you're saying, well, if a bunch of people agree to live in a society and say it's okay to rape people, then that rape's not an act of aggression. It won't occur that way. Even if people similarly have beliefs and have there will always be things on the fringe. And so inevitably what ends up happening is that these sorts of, it's not workable in the consequentialist framework. Things will get much worse because our system's too large and too complex, and the cat's already out of the bag. But it's also not going to be
You said you can't argue that there will be less aggression in your society. So
correct.
Actually I can, and I can prove you completely 100% wrong.
Okay.
It's very simple. You're advocating that your society be based off of aggression. I am advocating a society that is not based off of aggression, where aggression may occur. Yours is aggression is baked into the society. So I absolutely can argue that my society would have less aggression because it is not a feature of the system. It is a consequence of criminals. You are advocating giving the criminals power to aggress, and that aggression be baked into the system. And so definitionally, it is absolutely objectively true that you are arguing for more aggression, which is unjustified.
That's not true. Just because, even if that was true, right, that still doesn't prove that there would be less aggression under your system. It doesn't prove that at all.
Absolutely it does. Yes, it does.
No, it doesn't. Not if the
state
consequence
is aggressive.
It doesn't matter. If the state being aggressive, right, would lead to 100, some sort of measurement, right, 100 aggression, right, but then not having a state would mean that the system that we're advocating for
here we engage in more utilitarian commie talk, right? Because you're saying it's not more aggression because now you're engaged in the consequences and the utilitarian calculus of said consequences. That is not what aggression is or isn't. Your system is aggressive. Period. It cannot not be aggressive. It requires aggression. My system could have aggressors in it, right? And my system could have non-aggressors in it. Yours requires that it be based upon aggression. It's not a utilitarian calculus of outcomes.
Are you an aggressor right now in this system?
What do you mean, am I an aggressor right now in this system?
Are you an aggressor in this system that currently exists?
I mean, I have aggressed upon people before in some capacity. Right?
But as you inevitably
aggression at some point, right?
As you inevitably will under any system, you'll be an aggressor. Okay, right? So the question is, even under this system, right, where we have the government aggressing, there could be further or lesser levels of individuals aggressing within that system, right? And so to just make the argument through a system of consequentialism that says a system that relies on state, which has some form of limited aggression, such as saying rape is illegal, like that, you would say that's a form of aggression, right? That's coercive to people. If people want to say, I don't think rape should be against the law, you think that they should voluntarily be allowed to live in societies that believe that, correct?
What? No. Rape is inherently aggressive.
Not if
you're like, this is a fake straw man. I'm not engaging in this. You understand?
No. The reason if we agree, listen, right? If we agree that it's an act of aggression that we're willing to accept. So, for example, if I'm a pirate community, take rape out of it, and I say our community, we voluntarily agree to live in a community that says might makes right.
No,
and if you have enough people to come to my,
there's no reason for me to allow you to continue down this. It's a complete straw man.
Why not? Why not?
Because you're getting rid of aggression. You're redefining and reshaping the argument.
How am I getting rid of aggression?
Because I'm not a moral subjectivist that thinks that like any society can organize itself off of any moral system, period. What I'm saying is that there are things that are ethically can be proven to be unjustifiable, which is aggression. I don't advocate for any society to have the right to deem it okay to rape people.
Well, take
you advocate for you advocate for aggression, which is a society where theft is baked into the system.
Okay, but why couldn't I voluntarily, under your system, why couldn't I voluntarily have a pirate community that says, we think that might makes right? Trial by force. If you want to take your neighbor's shit, it's okay. And you agree to live there and I agree to live there because we all think we're badasses, right? That's not aggression at that point.
Yes, it is. Might makes reality. It does not. Might makes reality. It does not make right. Right? Aggression is against natural law. Period.
Again, it's
just because a group of people voluntarily choose to aggress upon people doesn't make it right. Right? This is the very argument that I used against you in terms of the rape dungeon or the rape hut with the girl. Right? It's inherently aggressive. It's wrong.
But again, so then we get into the subjective nature of what aggression is, right? So for example, if in that system where I've agreed that my stuff is your stuff, if you could physically take it from me, you say, no, that was still aggression. But if we have a voluntary system that says you're allowed to take 5% of all my worth for community taxes for roads or something, couldn't I still say, well, that's still theft? You'd say no, because you've agreed to it.
That's not subjective. You're adding subjectivity into the system where it does not exist.
What are you talking about? Right. If I live in a system where I say you're allowed to come in the form of the tax man and take 5% of my wealth at the end of every month, you would say that that's not aggression if that tax man comes, correct?
If you go to a society and you say, look, I'm going to sign this contract that 5% of everything I make will go towards whatever, right? That's no different than hiring an insurance company.
That's still...
Right? That's a voluntary transaction. That's not aggression.
Right. And so if I similarly set up a system that said, instead of 5%, I'm saying that you could come and based on your strength or the amount of people you have or something of that nature, you could take whatever you want, but I'm going to play the same game and take what I want from my neighbors based on that. How is that not similar? Both is taking people's property.
So you're saying you voluntarily go into a system and everyone that is involved is also voluntarily agreed to it.
Yeah, it's like a pirate.
So you have 100 people. You have 100 people, right? And they all voluntarily agree that, like the Genghis Khan style, the strongest, one gets to rule over and have whatever they want.
Sure.
It's stupid. It's dumb. It's it's inefficacious. It's a bad way to organize yourself. But no, it's not aggression in that instance. No.
Right, and but the problem is this wouldn't be as rare as you would think, right? There would be people that would be undesirable for many communities that would not be able to fit in there for whatever reason. Maybe it is because they're just obnoxious to be around. Maybe it's because they have some sort of illness that most communities don't want to take them in, whatever. And so what happens, and you can see this happening in societies today, one of the last resorts would be to go to communities where they would be accepted. And maybe the communities that would accept them would say, well, here's how we live. We're going to tax that. We're going to do whatever we want, right? We're going to take 30% of your shit. And you'd be like, shit, I have to acquiesce to this because I don't have another choice. Or maybe they say, you're going to trade sexual favors for this. And you would say, well, shit, I have to acquiesce to this. I don't think that we would say just because coercion. That person has quote. Right. But you agreed by being there.
Yeah. If you move to a place, right? And you say like, you can rape me, right? Well, then it's not rape because you agreed to it. Right. If you move to a place, it's not theft. If you agreed that people could come and take whatever you had collected, it's stupid.
I disagree. I don't know that I would use the term rape, but I'm saying that people would still feel coerced.
So do you think we should make boxing matches illegal? You think boxing should be outlawed? Well, two people voluntarily chose to get into a place and fight, right?
Agreed. Right. So
it's not aggression. It's not the initiation of force, right? They both voluntarily agreed to mutual combat. Like,
well, first off, even in that example, like you could hear colloquially that we would say that boxer was the more aggressive boxer. He engaged in more aggression. So
yeah, but now you're just trying to slip into subverting definitions to make your argument because you don't want to argue from principles.
No, I'm arguing for principle. I'm saying in the situation that, again, the practical application of trying to apply this would be that there would be all sorts of people that would still be forced to voluntarily agree to something that they wouldn't voluntarily agree to if they weren't coerced in some sort of metric.
Right, but that's aggressive.
Human nature.
If you're coercing people into signing a contract against their will, that's aggression.
Right. That's human nature. That's inevitable. That's inevitable.
Yeah, criminals are inevitable. That doesn't make it right or wrong.
Well, no. Do you think there are any two people that are identical in thought?
I mean, I guess it's possible. I don't know. Like, what does
Probably
that have to do with
not.
anything?
So let's say we have a community of 100 households, right? What do you think the chances are that those 100 households completely agree on everything?
Almost certainly slim to none.
Right. So if I want to move into this community, there might be 80% of the things that I agree with, but 20% I don't. But I feel because that's my best opportunity to get the things that I want, that I'm willing to accept that, correct?
If that's what you want to do, then you agree to those terms.
Okay, so I agreed to those terms, but we would still say those 20%. Maybe that 20% includes paying 5% of taxes for, a fire department and roads, right? I don't like that. I'm still pissed. If I could get rid of it tomorrow, I would, right? But they're still coming and taking that money. Is that aggression?
Wait, hold on. Can you say that again? I got Spurs
Yeah,
in
so
chat
let's say,
freaking out on me.
Yeah, no problem. Let's say that part of the, I do have to leave here. So
Yeah.
let's say
Finish
that
your final argument.
Let's say that 5% of taxes is the one thing that I was like, well, shit, I have to accept this to be here. But if it was up to me, I'd snap my fingers and say, don't take this money. I think this is theft. I don't want you taking my shit. I only agreed to it because I was basically between a rock and a hard place. And this was the other shit that I want in a society had. Would that be aggression when the tax man comes to take my taxes?
It's not coercion because the environmental circumstances of your choices lead you into one direction or another, right?
But how
if you voluntarily choose,
society?
if you voluntarily choose to move to an area, right? It's not an act of aggression if you sign that you want to do certain things.
Okay, so then how's that different from today's society, really? Like it
Because
might be
one
true
is
that
theft
there are,
and one is theft and one is you just not liking it.
you don't like it here.
I don't
Walk
give a
away.
fuck about your histrionics.
Walk away. You don't like
What
paying
do you mean
taxes.
walk away?
Don't live here.
Where am I going to go?
I don't know.
I'm
but
a
that
hostage
doesn't prove
here.
that. Right. Similarly, you're not.
No, I'm a
you could leave
hostage.
because of this country. This country says you're not allowed to leave.
I'm allowed to leave. Where am I going to go?
Right. But that's not a problem of this state then, right? Because similarly, you would never say that the communities that are set up, right, that they would only be coercive if there was possible places that people could go. You wouldn't say it's the fault of Robistan that I've set up these rules and so many people came here and was like, well, fuck, I have nowhere to go. I have to come here. You wouldn't say that makes me the aggressor. I'd say, hey, you're free to leave. Hit the bricks, right? So that's not me being an aggressor because you don't feel that you have anywhere else to go. So how could you blame any individual state today?
Yeah, I can leave, right? But I can't, and I could presumably renounce my citizenship if there is some place for me to go, right?
But why is that relevant to, like, why is it that this state is only considered aggressive if there's nowhere else to go? Let's say that hypothetically there was a country that opened up, let's say like Algeria opens up and says, no state, it's the exact thing that you're looking for, right? And the United States says, sure, you could renounce your citizenship and go there. Would you then say that everyone living within the United States is no longer living under an aggressive state because all of them could go to Algeria if they wanted?
I mean, assuming America doesn't invade Algeria, which we know they would in that instance.
Well, that's going to be a consequentialist problem with ANCAP
right.
in the first place, that the whole world's not going to become ANCAP at once. And so states will invade, the places. But again, that's what I'm talking about. Like, it hinges upon, I don't think that we could say the existence of state hinges, that it's unjustified, hinges on the idea that there must be nowhere else to go that isn't a state. Like, that seems nonsensical.
When did you voluntarily sign the Constitution and agree to pay taxes?
Well, I could leave.
When did you voluntarily do that?
I voluntarily did it right now by refusing to leave.
I mean, if that's your claim, sure, right? It's not my claim.
Well, there is some voluntary. Like, for example, if your parents say
I was
you
coerced into do it,
and okay, then leave.
No, I'm saying like I'm coerced into this situation. I have to pay taxes.
Right.
Even if I leave right now, I owe taxes I never agreed to the United States. Right.
Right. But again, this is going to be
a not
problem.
aggressive.
But listen, let's say that you
I never agreed to be here.
Stretch. Let's say I don't know.
Maybe your argument is you can escape your captor, therefore you were never kidnapped. Therefore, kidnapping is not wrong.
That's not my argument, right? Let's say that you are a person that fundamentally believes, even in a voluntary system, that taxation of any form is unjustified, right? You don't think that you should ever have to give any sort of money to a collective for a collective good. I don't know if you believe that, but you could imagine a person that would believe that, correct?
Mm-hmm.
All right, so let's say under your system, we now have a system where the state doesn't exist and there's no aggression. We have all these small communities, covenants or whatever you want to call them. And all of the ones that are worth a shit, right? They aren't just like insane, like just free-for-alls. All of them, let's say there are thousands of them, but all of them require some minuscule donation or giving of money in order to reside there for some sort of collective good. So the metrics that you want would would you say then that those are coercive? Because you fundamentally believe that's always, no, you would say, well, that's not coercive because I could leave. I voluntarily have agreed to be here and I could go to the worst societies. But I choose to say that this society that is forcing me to give this money over is one that's beneficial. Once you make that concession and say that then it's no longer aggression, then you're in the poor position of having to argue that if a covenant type society is willing to accept you now, then it is the state itself is not inherently unjustified, because even though you feel that there is no better option for you to leave, there is a literal physical option for you to leave. Therefore, it's not coercion.
So here's what you're doing. What you're doing is you're taking out the principal elements of the state, and what you're doing is describing the state from a consequentialist framework, and then saying it's justified because you can imagine an area where the consequences are the same, right? Now, that may be true. There may be a situation where, let's say the whole world is Ancapistan, right? And every single covenant community that exists, right, requires a voluntary contract that requires some form of tithing or some form of, whatever, etc. Then you're saying, well, therefore, states are justified because consequentially, I can imagine a scenario where taxes would exist in your world everywhere you go. Therefore, you can't say that taxes are morally unjustified here. What you're doing is you're taking away the kidnapping. You're taking away the coercion.
No, because here's the problem. It is
you're taking away the voluntarism.
No, it is a direct
response. Pure consequentialist
No,
leftist
it is not. This
no
is
different
not
than the commie.
No, it is not consequential. You're no different than the commie. You're involved in some utopia that will lead to the degradation of the majority.
I'm the one presenting the exact argument that is a potential within my systems. Therefore, it's not what I would prefer, and therefore it is not utopian. You're the one engaged in the consequential analysis.
Let me explain why this isn't consequential. It's because your argument as to the actual, what is the predictable human nature, it has nothing to, you could say it has to do with consequences, but I think it's more fundamental level in that we're talking about human nature. Human nature is that you won't find two people that necessarily agree on everything. And so they'll have to, for covenants or communities to exist of 100 households or more or less, or whatever, there will have to be some sort of compromise. That you can't just say everything I want will always be it, and I'll find like-minded people in my community. Inevitably, you'll have to have some compromise with your neighbor, with your community, or something. And that compromise could be something we're saying tithing, taxation, whatever you want to call it, something of that nature. And you could say, well, I've looked around, and even though I'm against this, I think that it's bad, I'm willing to accept it because I think that this society right here is preferential to all those societies that exist that don't require that. I think those societies have other things about them that I find worse, right? And so you say, well, that wouldn't be aggression then. Even though I don't want to give that money, I have acquiesced by mere fact of living in that community. I've acquiesced to giving that money up because the other things that I see, I consider beneficial. That is a direct apples to apples comparison to if there was a society that people could move to now that didn't require taxation and you could choose to live there, but you said, I don't want to live there because I think it's worse, therefore I choose to remain here. Then you couldn't say that the fundamental state of the United States is unjustified because people have an option.
Really long analysis, and you're intentionally getting rid of principal elements, right? So, assuming we live in this society, right? There's 100 countries, right? And those 100 countries all have taxation, right? And you're saying, and so because of that, like if you want to voluntarily, which is a huge principle difference, right? You voluntarily choose to live in the one that you currently have that has some form of taxation, because you believe that it is better than the other places. And there is no free land, right? You can't explore the stars. You can't go homestead property anywhere. All property has been homesteaded, right? It is still, if those systems are within a respecting private property rights and the non-aggression principle, you still very easily could come together with a group of people that have like-minded views that you have, purchase a bunch of property, and then go to any one of these 100 places, offer them enough money, right, to purchase a plot of land under the agreement that you will not pay taxes. And then lo and behold, what you would have is a society that does not have that taxation, right? You're trying to bake into this an assumption that all of the country would willingly and voluntarily have these forms of taxation as a means of defeating it, but you're only doing it from the consequences of the action. You're not doing it from the actual principal elements, which is one is voluntary and the other is not. One is stolen land and the other is not.
You're misunderstanding what I'm saying. I'm not saying that scenario. I'm not saying that you and a bunch of like-minded people agree to pay the United States a huge sum of money for a parcel of land to be left. That's not what I'm saying at all. I'm saying that if the argument is that taxation is not theft, if you acquiesce to it. And so even if you're morally against taxation in your vision of society, and you come into a community that requires taxation and you say, morally, I'm opposed, or morally is not the best word. You know what I'm saying, though. Like, I feel that this is unjustified. All taxation is always unjustified. But this society that requires that taxation, I find preferable to all societies that don't. That I've seen, that I'm capable of physically traversing to and living in. And so I will choose this society, even though I think it is unjustified to require me to pay these monies. And you said that then would not be an act of aggression because I have acquiesced by being there, right?
Let me explain. If I had Elon Musk's bank account, right? Now, and I want to buy a portion of Florida, right?
Okay.
Would it not cause war if I just say I'm going to buy this portion, and I no longer it's going to be its own separate country? Who gets to choose that?
That's
your elected officials, right? No. Right? It's not a consequential. What I'm saying is there's no private property owner. There is no private property owner of the United States of America.
Okay. What does that have to do with anything?
What it means is I can't buy a portion of Florida and then live the way that I want to live because there's no private property owner.
That's not the example I'm giving. I'm saying that there's
I'm saying in the example that you're giving. In the example where the taxation, don't just say no. I've routed you like 30 times in this discussion.
What are you talking about? It has nothing to do. You're saying you keep switching it to a bunch of people come together in the United States and agree to pay the government but there's no private property. Like, that's not what I'm saying. I'm saying that there are places that are uninhabited now, right? But let's not even talk about that. Let's just say that there's a country in Africa through some sort of upheaval that the people there, whoever gets into power, says everything is homestead now. Everything, right? There will be no taxation. This will be in Kapistan. You come here if you want. And countries like the United States in particular says, we'll give you a plane ticket. We'll send you there. Right. We'll give you a plane ticket. We'll send you. Right? Like you would say then in that situation, because there is a viable way to not acquiesce to this system and instead go to that system, the people that choose to stay, even if they hate the taxes, even if they say, I fucking hate these taxes, but they say, well, I still prefer the United States to that place, then under your logic, this state of the United States would no longer be a state.
Under one condition, right? Not only do they have to give me the plane ticket, they have to return to me all taxes I've ever paid, including taxes I've ever paid on, sorry, when you buy goods. I can't think of the fucking tax right now. Like sales tax, property tax, taxes I paid to the IRS, all of those things, right? And they'd have to pay me the subjective value of my home and determine.
Okay, but nonetheless, why would they have to pay
property I've ever owned? Well, if I own my home.
So it doesn't have to be the state that pays you.
Yeah, I mean, like, I'm sure I could sell my home. I could sell my home to someone else, right?
Right.
They got to pay me back the
But
whatever they took.
Let's say that
whatever
was
they took.
Let's say that was accomplished. They say, Fabian, we can't direct. It would be impossible to find. But let's say they say we know what you're in.
Problem, right? Because now I have to leave.
But let's say that it'll never not be a problem for you because you were born here against your will, whatever. But let's say then someone born tomorrow, once that system exists, the United States is no longer a state, correct?
Well, did they take any taxes off of this person? Does this person ever
the person
bought anything?
Born?
Yeah.
The person born? Yeah, but they could have moved to Algeria.
No, they weren't. They were a child.
They didn't. Oh, but then again, okay, then your system's not going to solve that because presumably in your system of these covenants, children will be born that haven't acquiesced to the rules of that society. But you would say, well, they're not adults. Like we understand that there are certain limitations.
I mean, like the problem is that the state has illegitimate property, right? So the state has already stolen property. So it doesn't magically become not a state unless it dissolves all of the property that it's already stolen. If it did all of those things, then it would no longer be a state. Sure. If it gave the option to give, to let people out of it, right? Allowed people to fly planes, gave up all the money that it previously stole and all of the land that it previously stole. Well, the state would have to dissolve at that point, right? I mean, like there's not enough money in the coffers. We're already $32 trillion in debt, right?
But if this place this is the problem with your belief here is that if that society had always existed, and to some extent it has, like you could say that there's no ability to homestead. Sure there is. Who's going to prevent you necessarily from going to certain areas of like bushland areas, right? Once you're in the country, no one would find you.
It's illegal.
Well, but
the government found you, they'd punish you.
For all practical purposes, you could theoretically, like there are areas of the ocean that aren't owned by any government. If you wanted to go out there and somehow build a sea land or whatever the shit you used to hear about, theoretically you could do that. The resources might be impractical, but again, that's a matter of consequentialism, right? The problem with your argument is it hinges upon that you're not solving the things that you're claiming to solve. You're just saying,
not solving in my system, right? Because you're still saying that the state has to give up all of the property it's already stolen.
But again, I'm not trying to solve anything. You're saying that any system that advocates for aggression, which you define as people's property, I forget the exact definition, but in general, harming individual physically or their physical property. So taxation would apply, or, coercive laws that said that you couldn't do something you want. Those would all be acts of aggression. That means the advocacy for any state that would do any of those things, like have laws or have taxations, is advocacy for an unjustified system.
No.
I'm wrong?
Advocation for a state that would have those things, yes.
But you're being circular then, because your definition of a state is
circular. I'm not being circular. I feel like you're intentionally misunderstanding at this point.
No, I'm not. I assure you I'm not. It seemed to me that you said your definition of a state
stolen land. Has the United States of America stolen land from people? Okay.
Sure. Okay.
It's a state until it gets rid of that land.
You're circumventing what you're giving an example of what a state is, but when I'm asking for a definition of a state, you can't just say, well, it's this example, because there are states outside of the United States. You would agree with that, right? Okay,
what do you mean we have to have a definition? An example of a state.
Well, you could give examples of a state, but that's not going to be a cohesive definition, right? If I say what's a state, and you say
do you want me to redefine state?
No, but you tell me if I'm wrong. I thought that what you defined state as was basically a government that engages in aggression.
A government that engages in aggression, sure, yeah.
That's and then
enough. There are other principal elements, but it's good enough.
Right. So then when I asked you to define aggression, you were like, well, only if the state's doing it.
What?
Like, that's what you just. It's circular.
I never said that.
When we were just going in to sort of aggression, and me saying, well, there are other places you can go. You could go to places like Sealand, or maybe places of Antarctica and things like that. I said the problem is you're not able to solve the very things that aggression will still exist. Your problem, you said that it's unjustified to advocate for a system that would have aggression, and I'm saying that aggression would be inevitable in the system, and it's baked in the goods of human nature, because there would still be people by human nature that would be forced.
That's animal nature.
No, there would still be acquiescence to sort of things that you didn't agree with, because you thought that you weighed the pros and cons, so you acquiesce to those things, and you say that that's not defined as aggression.
No, you're just saying gobbledygook now.
No, I'm not.
The state
I'm not
stole
at all.
property. This is aggression. The state has to dissolve to pay restitution for its crimes.
But that's not all aggression.
A voluntary society, right? Where a group of individuals come together and voluntarily choose to live under certain rules that they all voluntarily agreed to, does not a state make, because there's no aggression.
I disagree. I think that it could definitely, I think that the distinction that you're saying, that you could choose to move with your feet in the system that you're talking about, therefore that doesn't make it aggression. If people voluntarily chose to be there,
why do you disagree? Why do you disagree that the principal element between my definition of what is state and state isn't has aggression in it? Why do you disagree with that?
Because to me, it seems that your understanding of aggression, or how you're defining it, would mean that any form of taxation that someone disagreed with, even if they acquiesced to live in that society, would still be considered an act of aggression.
No, I didn't say that.
No, I'm not saying you said that. I'm saying that's what I get from what you're saying. That the individual would say, well, I can't really move with my feet. There's a bunch of barriers, and there's no place that's safe, or no place that would, let's say you're gay. Let's say that you're gay and you live in Georgia, right? And that you need to be around that area of Georgia for some reason, because it's not feasible for you to get elsewhere, right? And you're like, well, shit, the only societies here that I could practically get to are societies that will accept me. The only societies that would accept me are ones that I have to pay some tithe.
Maybe
I still disagree with the tithe.
Maybe I can do this. Maybe I can do this in a different analogy, right? So let's say the government grants company A a whole bunch of special privileges and legal protections, right? And allows company A to commit fraud, right? They're just immune to prosecution from fraud. Right? And then company B isn't immune to a fraud or anything like that, right? Right?
Okay.
Now company A grows and takes over most of the domain, right? Company A is still a problem just because company isn't not a problem just because company B exists. Company A is founded upon fraud and criminality, and company B isn't, right?
Okay.
The fact that I choose to buy a product from company A because it's $10 cheaper doesn't all of a sudden say, well, now company A is morally justified in all of the fraud and illegal things that they've done because you chose to buy something for $30 from company A as opposed to buying it for $40 from company B. The existence of company B doesn't undo the fraud and criminality of company A. The United States is the exact same example.
No one's saying that. The difference would be if you say the mere act of owning a company is something that's always unjustified, right? That's what we're talking. It's not that no one's arguing. No, listen.
I'm not. I'm saying company B is perfectly justified.
Right. That's the point, right? No one is arguing.
You're saying because they're both companies, then, fraud happens. No. So company A is fine.
What you're saying is
company B.
Again, you keep switching sort of the goalpost here. You keep going back to the United States is unjust. Listen, you keep going back to the United States is unjustified. That's not the point you need to prove. You need to prove that advocacy for any state is unjustified, right? And then when I ask you to define state, you're like, well, one that acts on aggression, right? That coerces people through aggression, right? And then when I'm like, okay, let's say that a state exists, right? Or let's say that a governmental entity exists that does everything the United States does, but it's created tomorrow, right? And at the same time that it's created, there's another place created that's like, we're in Kapistan. And that it does the exact same thing as the United States, the exact same laws, the exact same politician, everything the exact same. It's just not the United States. It doesn't own the same land, right? It's a new entity, right? And that state says we're going to do everything the same, right? And it happens to be born out of the southern United States, right? So you that have had a home there historically, whatever, you're still there. You can't just pick up and move. That's not how society works. But you could say, well, theoretically, if you guys don't like this, you could move to Ancapistan. You would say that's no longer a state. That's not a state.
No,
right? You're saying that
you're creating an argument for me that I'm not making. The United States is still a state.
Well, not the United States. We're talking the new state, the southern United State that was created.
Are you saying the United States completely dissolves, gives up all of its property?
Well, No. Let's say that just a portion of the South rises again, right?
Okay.
And they're like, okay, now we won some military battle, right? And we are going to continue to run with the exact same laws as the traditional United States, right? But we're not them. We didn't steal your money. And you could absolutely choose to leave if you want. You can go ahead. You can leave. Is that a state?
Okay. Well, I don't know how they won their land through war or whatever. Like, there's a lot
Whatever.
to pick apart there. But let's use a better example. Let's say Elon Musk buys the southern tip of Florida, creates a society, and for whatever reason, the United States is like, hey, you can have this land. We'll sell you this land. And somehow Elon Musk pays enough money to where every person living there voluntarily sells their land, right? And then he creates the nation of Muskia, right? And the nation of Muskia is a voluntary land, and he is the private property owner of that land. And in that land, there is a monopoly on the police. There is a judicial system very similar to what we have. There's taxes, etc. That's not a state. That's a private property owner exercising rights over his private property. And if you choose to want to come to his private property, he has the right to sell you certain land in that private property based upon following certain laws, and you can voluntarily choose to go do so. Muskie is not a state. United States still is.
I disagree.
Why?
Because I would say that there was still, by the definition of what you consider aggression, there would still be people that would stay there. And if you disagree
with me because of my definition that is commiserate with what I'm saying. You're just disagreeing to disagree now. You're just being recalcitrant.
Because there would be people that would feel that they didn't have a realistic option to leave, right? And so because they didn't have a realistic option to leave, maybe you're poor and you have a home in that area that Musk bought and you just don't have the economic mobility to leave. And so you have to stay there. You don't have the option to leave.
Then he didn't voluntarily purchase your property.
Well,
if you sold Musk your property, right? Then you voluntarily
choose not
did
to
that.
sell. What if you choose not to sell?
Then he doesn't get to force anybody to sell. That's aggression, which is how the fucking almost every goddamn country in the world was created, was by conquering people and stealing land. That's the fucking problem.
Which is inevitable. But even in your system, again, you can see it gets back. So that Musk scenario that you're talking about is basically the system that you're advocating for, except it would be presumably done at a global scale. And the problem is people are just going to say, no, I'm not moving. No, I won't sell. What are you going to do? Build around them? You're just going to be like, okay, in this little house right here, all of the things that we've agreed on, taxation, blah, 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 all of that, it doesn't apply here to that person, to that one person there. No, and that's what I'm saying. Like the idea, what you're talking about, the reason that fundamentally the aggression would still exist.
You've moved the goalposts so many goddamn times, bro.
I'm not.
Now you're talking about an entirely new scenario, right? Which is about common property and egress when individuals buy property around you and whether or not you have to live under that domain. Right? So presumably, right, you still live in the United States of America, right? It's just Muskia is all around you, right? Now Muskia would be an aggressor if they did not maintain the egress of your common property that you had before.
Why?
So
Muskia, it's their property. They can do what they want.
because you had egress before.
Okay, but again, you can see the subjective nature of like what aggression is considered based on all of these.
You not understanding things or pretending not to understand them doesn't mean you get to add the word subjectivity and then just keep saying things are subjective. They're not.
So now we have to say if you have to definitively prove that at one point you had egress, and if you at one point had egress, then no matter if I buy all the property surrounding you, you're always entitled to that egress no matter what. But what's that egress? Did I get one little path I could walk? Am I allowed to take my car? What if I think that the vehicle that you're taking is outlawed because we have a green society that says you can't use fossil fuels and you choose to take fossil fuels to go from, right? The problem is, right, in all of these societies, there's still going to be some form of you are willing to accept things that you otherwise wouldn't because you think that those things are preferential as a society as a whole. And given that, right, if we say that that's not considered aggression, then you can't get around the fact that if there is potential for you in the current society that we have now to move somewhere where you don't have to pay these taxes or live in these society, then the current societies that would say, look, these are the rules we set up, you're voluntarily here, would not be unethical by nature.
No. I mean, like, it's just, you're being
silly,
right? You're saying that because conflict arises in humans, right, that the state is justified because it is a system that coerces other people into a reduction of overall conflict. That's the communists' argument. You don't believe in bodily autonomy. You don't believe in individual rights. You don't believe in private property rights. You only believe in them. You only believe in them to a certain degree, to the 99%. And you think because consequentially warlords will arise that you can enforce a warlord that's your preference over other people and enforce slavery upon them, so long as that we reduce the amount of slavery to a preferential degree. It's no different than fucking communism, bro.
Again, I guess I'll just wrap up with this. You're advocating for a system that would basically just be local government systems, and you say, but that's okay because if people don't like it, they could move to a different local government to do it if they want. I'm saying that there are people that will not be happy totally with any government system because it's human nature to not agree totally with what any one individual, let alone any one society. So inevitably, people will have to choose things that they wouldn't have wanted, but they'll think that the cost or the benefit outweighs the cost. And you could reasonably say, well, those costs that they're incurring, even though they voluntarily accepted it, that they wouldn't accept if they had any other choice, which they don't, that's not considered aggression. I think that it's nonsensical. Not only is it not practical to have this ANCAP society for reasons you've already talked about, you've contradicted yourself. I don't want to say contradicted. You've pointed out throughout this conversation. One, you said that everything in this world has been through violence and theft. All states.
That's what you want to focus on?
But I think that's a pretty clear indication that if one small area says we're no longer going to abide by this game, the outside people would say we don't give a shit. It's impossible to be utopian and change everyone's mind. You also made the strange admission that if you were a child,
yet to do so.
What do you mean? How have
you're not showing a contradiction by me saying that the world has been full of violence and that states have conquered land.
Well, I said I wouldn't necessarily call it a contradiction. I said I wouldn't necessarily call it a contradiction. It would show the unworkable nature of what you're suggesting, right? Secondly, it is a contradiction.
So because colonialism existed at one point in time, aggression is justified?
And still what exists.
How do you not see that you're being like communist as fuck right now?
I'm not. You could say that.
You're justifying you're justifying that people don't have bodily autonomy and that they don't have private property rights, and that those things can be superseded by a state structure as a means of reducing conflict. This is the same argument of fascism. That's not what I'm doing. I'm showing that consequentially, when it comes to utilitarian, you've given the framework for why this won't work. You also did contradict yourself when you said, and I'm sure you'll backtrack now, when you said in the society I was talking about that it would still be aggressive because people would be born there that would be forced to apply to the rules of that society. You're picking apart what I said to change. No,
that is what you said. No, you said that. We can go back to the tape and see.
No, that's not what I said. You can retract it if you want, but that's what you said. Rob, that's bullshit. Okay, because I've advocated so many fucking times about guardianship and that the fact that a contract is the emergent will of the adult as a child is one that the guardian takes on that voluntary relationship, and once they come of age, then they have to voluntarily choose to sign the contract in the area or leave the area in some domain.
So then you did say, I can almost verbatim say what you said. I said, if this society like the United States starts up tomorrow and has all the same laws and things like that, and there is an ANCAP society where people can freely go and leave if they don't want to live in this new United States, I said, then at that point, they haven't stolen property or anything. It's voluntarily. And you said, yes, it still would have been aggression because what about the people born there? That's what you said.
No, that's not what I said.
We go back to the tape and look.
No, that's not what I said. It's not no, that's not what I said. That's not my argument.
Right? If you want to, I'm just saying that's what you said. If you want to say that's not what you meant, that's fine. But that is what you said.
Right? I mean, I got COVID, so if I misspoke during my frustrations with you, that's not my fucking argument, right?
But again, like there's the problem is, and the
because that doesn't follow libertarianism or any arguments that I would ever make, right?
So then, what age is it then acceptable to say?
What age is what acceptable to say?
Well, what age would it be acceptable to say that, like, okay, now you're acquiescing to be in this society once you're of a certain age?
Well, I mean, age of consent is a arbitrary measure that society dictates, right? I think appropriate age of consent is probably 24. I think that should be the age of consent with parental permission. At 18 is fine by me. Like, I don't necessarily see a problem with 16 or 17 being like the age of maturity with full age of consent being 24. I mean, it depends
You
upon
would
the
agree.
society. Like, I think it's a difficult thing because it is arbitrary, but you know, if a society said that like 9-year-olds reach the age of consent, then like I think we could pretty objective, like I think we could pretty much say that there's some abuse occurring in said society, right? But it is an arbitrary metric because people mature at different ages. The brain isn't fully developed until 24 to 26.
Okay, but again, we could see how practically your society, where it's like if you don't like it, leave, and there's a bunch of convents and communities, so you could pick the one that's right for you. That 19-year-old that's basically forced because he has no other choice to stay there and continue to abide by the rules of that covenant, and you would say, well, he hasn't reached the age of consent. Other people would reasonably say, of course he has. And so therefore, what you're doing is aggression by forcing this person to pay those monies or to abide by these rules.
Okay.
It just goes to show
no different. Well, no, it's not showing the subjectivity when you only engage in consequentialist analysis, right? Like your moral framework is anti-Christian and anti-capitalist and anti-freedom. It is, because you're just engaging in the consequences of your preferences, right? And then imposing that as a morally justifiable norm that you can enslave others to based upon your personal preferences.
It has nothing to do with
enslavement. It's no different than the communist that says that like the capitalist is exploiting the labor of the individual because, you know, they don't have a choice but to work for the wage slaves.
You do the same thing in your society. You just say it's okay because if you don't like it, you can get the fuck out. Literally the same thing.
Yeah. Yes. If it's voluntary, right? Yeah. Love it or leave it. I don't know what to fucking tell you.
Right.
We didn't steal the land. We didn't use aggression.
When I say love it or leave it now, you say, well, there's nowhere to go. Right. And
no,
so
I don't say there's nowhere to go. What I say is you stole fucking land and property. And I'm a kidnapping victim.
To set up your, how are you going? Like, inevitably, someone will have a claim to the land before you, no matter what. Once your ideal society begins, they'll say, "Nope, my ancestors were on that land before you. They were never justly compensated. Therefore, you have stolen land."
Yes, if there is homesteaded property, they're the original property owner. If that land was stolen from them, then you have to pay restitution or give the property back.
Okay, so let me ask you this. Let's say that I'm a poor person now, right? I don't have many means, right? Is there any amount of land in this country that wasn't homesteaded at some point?
Is there any amount of land that the national forest, many of the national forests haven't been homesteaded?
So that's my only option then as a poor person. I have to live in the national forest.
What the fuck are you talking about? How is that your only option?
Because I don't have money to pay restitution for the original homesteaders of all the land.
But you're a poor person. Whose property did you steal? What crime did you commit?
It has nothing to do with stealing property. We now are under your system, right? And under your system, the land all goes back to the original homesteaders, correct?
Okay.
All right. So now, as someone who doesn't have connection to that land for whatever reason, right? My family, you know, maybe my ancestors were slaves and never owned land, or maybe my ancestors were immigrants and never owned land, or whatever. Maybe they were serfs and, you know, going back and have never owned land going back generationally, right? So now where am I going to live? I have to pay restitution for wherever I'm going to land. I have to own a parcel of land. What the fuck are you talking?
Right? You don't owe restitution. What are you talking about?
So I could just move into your property? So I could just move into your property?
What the fuck are you talking about? You're just playing silly game.
Where am I going to live? Right? If all the property is owned and I don't have a stake to any of that. What? Excellent question.
They rent. They get a job.
Okay. All right. So what if no one's willing to rent to me? Then what?
What? Then I don't know. Like that's for you to figure out. You're an individual.
Right.
You have individual responsibility.
Right. So your system is only workable if the people, and how many people are we talking about? Like it would be a handful of people that would have the highest stake to the homestead.
I don't know.
claim.
All of the homeless people in LA. What the fuck are you talking about? Like, what are you?
What I'm talking about is you're literally advocating
question instead of trying to find a trip up of bullshit.
I am asking the real question. What I'm proving is, much like you keep calling me a communist, you're just a left-wing race hustler that wants to go back to the past and say who had the original claim to this land. And you're a give back the land to the Native American type people. Right. Why homesteaders? What about the Native Americans?
I would say the Cherokee in northern Georgia absolutely demand restitution for the land that was
Why
stolen.
just them? Why just them? What about
because they have a legitimate claim of homesteading.
Define legitimate claim.
Okay, so when you look at the Native American, the Cherokee, right, in northern Georgia, right, they built homes, they built houses, they weren't nomadic, right, right before the Trail of Tears, right. They had a post office. They fought in the Supreme Court for their property rights, right, And then Andrew Jackson just initiated the Trail of Tears and told him to fuck off. They homesteaded that property. They absolutely demand that property. The Cree, on the other hand, like, we don't have any evidence of them homesteading property. They were just nomads living off of the land. They didn't homestead property.
So it was okay to kick them off the land. They're not entitled to everything because they didn't put a home on it.
If they didn't homestead the property, right? So maybe you don't understand homesteading, right? From like a Lockean proviso. Well, then why are you pretending to not understand it?
Because what I'm saying is that there is always
you're doing sneaky debate bullshit like Dylan Burns was doing to you right now instead of being honest.
I'm not doing sneaky debate.
You know it.
No, what you're doing,
you understand it, and you're trying to get me to trip up on something that you already understand, so that you can pick things apart. You're being bad faith right now. No, you're being bad faith.
No, I'm not. What you're doing is that you keep talking over me and keep expounding on things because you can't get over the clear fact that this isn't rocket science. That inevitably we would be able to put to a very small amount of people if the United States government dissolved and gave the land back to every homesteader, and we say we don't include nomads in that. Fair enough, to every homesteader, that would be a very small portion of people, probably in the thousands. And then your system then would say that is the only justified system to give the land back to those people. And then those people say, now as owners of this land, we will decide what we want to do with the land. And if the vast majority of them say, we want to keep that land and everyone else get the fuck off of here, it doesn't matter if you own a house on one of that parcel of land because it goes back to that homesteader. And they originally had it and the government stole it, which then sold it to you at some point. And so therefore you have to get the fuck out because the person that now owns what was Georgia, the family that homesteaded it originally, or the 7 families that homesteaded it, say, get the fuck out, Fabian. We don't want you here. We don't give a shit. See ya. I don't care that you have a house here. It's ours now.
This is just a deliberate misunderstanding of homesteading and like property and like selling property. It wouldn't be thousands of people. It would be millions of people. Right?
How?
Because people have legitimately purchased property from people in the United States since its founding.
But much of that purchasing has been purchased through this. Much of it's been purchased from. There was originally people that homesteaded it, and many of those people had property stolen from the United States. Correct?
Sure. Yes.
Okay, and maybe that meant that either the United States literally took their property, or they were forced to sell because of the theft that was occurring from the United States in the form of taxation and other things, and so therefore they were forced to sell. But shouldn't that property be returned to them?
Property should be returned to the original owner if any property was stolen, right? But plenty of people, more than thousands, right, have legitimately purchased their property. Now, let's assume the property was stolen, and then the state sold that property to a person, right? And then you're saying, well, that land wasn't homesteaded, was legitimately homesteaded, and then someone else bought property illegally, right? The purveyor of the crime is the state, right?
Okay.
Right. So both people.
Who gets the land?
Right. See, that has to be figured out voluntarily between the two people, right? Because because the state committed the crime. The state committed. Yeah. Of course, it's difficult to get through restitution for the many crimes of the state of which you advocate for. Right? Like, obviously, it's a problem. Let me ask you this. It's been hundreds of years of criminality and theft and aggression.
Let me ask you this. There are 350...
That doesn't change the morality of the situation.
Let's settle it on this. There are, around 350 million people living in the geographic area of the United States?
Yeah, I think it's like 337 right now or something. Yeah.
Okay, right. How many of those people do you think, if your system of giving the land back to the homesteaders, if you just had to guess, what percentage of those people would be landowners?
Who fucking knows, man? I don't fucking know.
What do you mean? This seems to be something that you should have some idea of if it's the system you're advocating. You think it'd be more than half, less than half?
That's stupid.
What do you mean?
That's stupid.
Why is this stupid? Do you think it'd be more or less than half?
So now I have to be a cartographer, a historian.
No, I'm asking for some sort. When you're literally saying that we need to give
in my brain of all property that's ever existed in the United
States.
It's
your system. I'm not saying you're obviously.
No. It's
being
you.
Hyperbolic.
It's you that demands the consequences and demands the practicality as opposed to the morality from natural law. It's you that goes against that is advocating for theft. And you're saying, well, it seems impractical, therefore it is morally unjustified.
No, what I'm suggesting is that your system will lead to millions of people feeling like their property has been stolen in some manner, because someone will say, actually, I have a claim to that land before you did. And so the property that you thought you owned, I could prove that actually my family homesteaded and I'm the legal owner of that property. And so, or even if you've rented property, but or you've rented land, but put property on it, such as homes and stuff, that now becomes all worthless, because what you can't pick up and carry with you and hope that someone that now owns land lets you move on to their land is now worthless, right? And that's so it will lead to millions of people. Millions of people will be displaced under your system, which you could say is consequentialist. But what I'm saying is, even not looking at it through a consequentialist frameworks, that would still be considered aggression by literally forcing people to pick up and move.
No, this is you're misinterpreting intentionally. So let me put it in a modern context under the state that we live under, right? You buy a vacation.
Can I say I have to be out in 5 minutes, but I'll leave you talk. I do have to be out.
Yeah. So let's say you buy a vacation home in Maine, right? You don't go to the vacation home for 10 years. It's yours. You bought it. You spent money on it, right? And you go like maybe once, and then squatters move in, right? And squatters commit fraud and draw up documents to a deed to the house. And then they sell it to a new homeowner, right? And then 8 years, 9 years, 10 years later, you show up to your vacation home to do some repairs because it's your retirement plan, right? I'm going to retire by fixing up this house and selling it. And then you get there, and lo and behold, there's a family that has 10 years where they've been living in this home, right? What you're saying is that somehow that's not stolen land, that you don't deserve any compensation, that there isn't a problem here. Of course there's a problem. You own a vacation home and your retirement plan is this vacation home, and squatters moved in and sold it to somebody else. Like, something has to be done to correct this situation. My ability to correct this situation and figure out exactly how the government would correct all of this situation does not change the question of whether or not it was ethically justified for the squatter to steal your home and sell it to someone else. That's not the argument. You're saying it's impractical, so therefore we're okay with it.
Unless you have reason to dispute this, I think that any reasonable person would say that less than half of the people that currently reside in the geographical area of this country would end up being landowners in the system that you're suggesting, right? And because of that, we would see mass displacement of people based on the whims of the people that we now say were the original homesteaders that owned that land. So people that had signed contracts and rented property for long amounts of times, who did nothing unethical or untoward themselves, will now be displaced based on the whims of people that now have ancestral claims to land from hundreds upon hundreds of years ago. It is not a workable system in a consequentialist sense, but it also predictably in a non-consequentialist sense will lead to the very aggression you're talking about. It's just that the aggression goes from being what we call the state today to be going to what we now consider are the private property owners of the past.
Yeah, this is you're calling it non-consequentialist, engaging in consequentialism. And of course, the problem with trying to morally justify things through consequentialism is you get to frame the consequences with your little crystal ball about what will or won't happen, and you make justified moral norms about the state being able to do things based off of your preferred outcomes, and that's what leads to socialism.
That's not what I'm doing. What you're doing is you're advocating an unworkable system, which in its own right is something that's immoral. But more importantly, you're not even seeking to solve the principles that you claim to be. Let me ask you this, Fabian. Do you own your home?
No.
Okay, so you rent, right?
Yeah.
Did you sign a contract to rent? Like, you reasonably expect to be there for a certain amount of time?
Yeah, signed a lease.
Okay. Okay, so let's say that your system comes into effect tomorrow, right? And now someone says, actually, my name's, so Jim Washington. I have an ancestral homestead claim to, where you're at and 1,000 square miles surrounding that, right? And so get the fuck out of here, Fabian. Do you feel you've been aggressed?
No, yes, I've been aggressed. Absolutely.
Therefore, you're admitting that your system will lead to aggression as well.
The original private property owner didn't aggress upon me. The people that stole the apartment building and fraudulently had me sign a lease are the aggressors. The current property management company is the one that owes me restitution for me to be able to, for however much it costs me to evict the premises and to go find a new place to live and the moving expenses.
Well, I disagree. I think that the idea that the person who you up would be engaged.
You think the squatters that sold
You're a squatter.
the new family.
You're a squatter.
In this situation, assuming someone
Let me
else.
ask you, do you think that squatting on someone's land is an act of aggression?
I think squatting on someone else's land is an act of aggression. Against their will. Yeah.
So you'll admit that you're aggressing right now, constantly.
Who said that?
Well, wouldn't you acknowledge that there's a better than not chance that the original homesteaders of your land aren't the current owners of it?
I don't know that. I'm in Virginia, so probably not.
Well, you talked about how much of this land was stolen. So it's certainly that many people on average would be actual squatters. Because even if you think that
all of this land is technically stolen by the United States government, because nobody fully owns their land because of the aggression that is existing in the state, right? But that doesn't mean that technically the land that's stolen is the state. The state is squatting on all of the land with their aggression. But that being said, without getting that technical, right? It's more than likely chance that this land was not homesteaded. I'm in Virginia. Most of the tribes that were here were nomadic.
I thought you said that almost the majority of the country was homesteaded.
Well, I mean,
by definition, it was homesteaded. Someone put a home there.
Yeah, which would be the original private property owner.
Okay, so then it was homesteaded.
Yeah, but we don't know whether I don't know whether or not the land I'm currently on was homesteaded first by a Native American tribe that was then murdered, or whether or not it was a colonist that homesteaded the property, and the chain of custody has been legitimate the entire time. I don't know.
But you're pretty certain that the people that originally would be those homesteaders their ancestors aren't the ones that currently own it. Because the government.
I don't know that.
You might not know, but there's a pretty good chance of it.
What? No. What is this weird percentile thing about whether or not I'm living? This is silly. This is a silly line of questioning.
Because your entire argument is that through so much of the theft of the government, that so many people have been disenfranchised and had their property and land stolen because of what the government's done. In fact, the majority of the country, I would say.
Well, the entirety of the country is stolen by the United States, right? But that doesn't mean that the private property rights haven't had an appropriate chain of custody to where I am now. If someone has evidence that that is not the case, then they need to provide that evidence. And if they can provide that evidence, then yes, restitution needs to be paid.
Okay. I think that people could judge for themselves. It's clearly an unworkable system, in my opinion. I think that it doesn't solve what you're talking about, that it'll lead to mass displacement of people that have done nothing wrong, that in good faith signed leases or bought property that they were unknowingly buying through something that was stolen through the state or something like that. I think that the problem with the ANCAPs, it's just not workable. You can constantly see how the replacement that would be had would still be people being coerced to do things. It's just that they're told if you don't like it, you could leave. It's an argument that you could make right now. You literally could. So I don't know, but I do have to get going. Pisco said he would love to talk to you.
In summation,
go ahead,
I would say that one of the problems with so many conservatives and the right currently is that they stopped arguing, especially as Christianity has lost some of its influences. Stopped arguing from first principles, and that what you have done is that you have used consequential analysis of what you believe in your head based off of your own subjective analysis would be the pragmatic approach in being able to institute what it is that I advocate for. And therefore you establish moral norms that justify aggression, force, slavery, and the abolishment of bodily autonomy. And that unfortunately, this is why the power of the state keeps going, because of those instances, and that this is the path to socialism. And until we bite the bullet and recognize that we actually need to argue our ethics and our morality from first principles, and actually recognize that we can't morally justify things based off of the perceived outcomes, that we will continuously have growing state power, and that all of the things that you don't want to come will come to power, will come to pass.
I think the key word there was bite the bullet, because that's exactly what would be happening. But no, I appreciate the conversation. Like I said, Pisco said
a fiery debate.
Yeah, no problem. I'm not. Unlike so many people, we could yell at each other, and it's absolutely fine.
So
I don't
I'll
mind.
still rate
Pisco said that I gotta go. Pisco said he would like to talk to you about this topic if you would like. I'm sure you can.
Just tell me,
hook up
yeah,
with him on
Pisco,
Discord,
DM me sometime. You've DM'd me on Discord
all right.
before. I think we're good.
Well, thanks for having me on tonight, and I appreciate you coming on my show. But I do have to get going. My wife's gonna be pissed because I'm an hour late. But oh well. We'll see you, man. Take it easy. Have a happy New Year.
7 minutes late, actually.
Not good. So have a happy New Year if I don't see you.
All right, brother. You too. You just watched a clip from our Twitch channel, Fabian Liberty. If you like content like this, please like and subscribe here on YouTube, or go ahead and give us a follow on twitch.tv/Fabian Liberty.